A few months ago, I talked to Nick Plante, who's a leading young voice in the movement to be more mindful in our day-to-day tech use. After that conversation, I knew I had to continue to work with movements that are looking to bring balance to the way that we're entering into the digital world. I was recently up in New York City and decided to meet up with both Nick and Joe, the CEO of the Light Phone Company, to talk about how Gen Z can continue to build a better relationship with technology. This is that conversation. Hey everybody, José Gaona, President and CEO of ZETA, here in Brooklyn, New York for a very special conversation today, joined by Nick and Joe to talk about some really cool topics today. We're going to be talking both about tech, policy, how we're being conscious about minimizing our tech use or reshaping our tech use, both as individuals and also as a community around policy. This is going to be a chill, casual conversation, nothing too crazy. And really, I'm just going to be looking at you guys so we can have a conversation. Don't mind the cameras. But let's get into it. Can you all tell me a little bit about you and your backgrounds? I know kind of both of you now, but who wants to start? Who wants to tell me a little bit about themselves?
I'll go first.
Okay.
I'm Nick. I'm an organizer working on tech and society problems here in New York. I spend my time advocating for policy change and building community, kind of running more educational interventions as well. I'm a policy lead and campaigns lead at Design It For Us. I facilitated the School of Radical Attention here in Brooklyn as well, where we experiment with the capacity of our minds beyond what typical social media and smartphone use allows us to access on the day-to-day.
Very cool. Are you native to the area?
I'm from Long Island. I went to school in Philly. I studied psych at Penn. That's kind of how I got my start in this world. I was doing research on behavior change, specifically how to help people reduce unwanted use of technology. So if they said, hey, I have a bad habit, I do this thing too much, I feel a little addicted to my tech, what could you build? How could you sort of help them change that? Yeah.
Nice. For those of you wondering, this is not our first time having a conversation for ZETA. You've been a guest on our podcast.
Indeed.
So we'll link that up for folks that want to go check that out. That was a really good conversation.
It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was really good. Also, we went like really deep into the questions immediately.
We got into the life story.
Yeah, we did. Yeah. All right, Joe, what about you?
Yeah, my name is Joe Hollier. I'm a Brooklyn resident. I came here for art school maybe 15 years ago, and about 10 years ago, I started the Light Phone with my partner Kai, and I think we're just really interested in challenging the business model that we feel is one of the cruxes of why we've gotten to where we've gotten with our relationship with technology. So I think by trying to radically change our business model, make a product that's a tool and you are the customer versus this sort of business model we've seen so much with smartphone apps, to try to provide people an alternative to being so hyper-connected, and to be more conscious about how and when they use technology in different parts of their life.
Yeah. Are you also native to the area, or did you come in from somewhere else?
I grew up in New Jersey, so probably pretty similar train riding for shows and skateboarding and such as a kid.
Nice, okay. I grew up in California, so to me that means both of you are local. In California, I know here that probably caused a commotion.
I probably grew up like 10 to 15 miles from where we are right now.
Exactly.
So.
Yeah. Well, I always say I'm from San Francisco, or like kind of grew up in that area. I grew up 4 hours north of San Francisco, but like that's the closest, like metropolitan area. It's like what people identify. It was really nice to like have a conversation with you both. I'm really excited, and we're actually in a special place. We're not just like in a random room. We're in your office space.
Yeah, it's a shared co-working space here in New York called NewLab. It's a converted 1892 First Navy ship hangar. It's like ships back in the day.
Really?
Yeah. now the city's sort of repurposed a lot of these parts of the Navy Yard for different things like co-working space for design-oriented tech companies to there's movies going on and stuff. But it's a cool hangar. We're in this little cubicle conference room.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you for hosting us. This is really, really cool. And we're super excited to be up here. It's a nice fresh break from DC, especially as the shutdown continues, federal government shutdown. So very glad that you welcomed us to New York. We have a couple of questions that we're going to dive into. And again, this is like casual. I'm going to open these up for thoughts. Maybe we'll go on some tangents. But the first thing I want to talk about is particularly because of our kind of age, area expertise and backgrounds of work, we have from young millennial to like mid Gen Z.
Sure.
Yeah.
Who knows at this point? I feel like Gen Z's been like elongated.
Yeah. I know. I'm old Gen Z. But you're right. Yeah. So we have a good range here of folks from like kind of like the rise of social medias and our smartphones to folks that really are like growing up immersed in these technologies, right? And so we're going to talk about Gen Z technology today, kind of bridging that generational conversation. The first question I have, Joe, I'm kind of looking at you here. You've watched multiple generations now grow up with tech in some form, from flip phones. I don't know if you had a flip phone.
I did, but it was like the very end of high school, maybe.
Oh, yeah. To smartphones, to the light phone. What feels fundamentally different about Gen Z or young people broadly and their relationship to technology today?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to try to necessarily project what I feel like they might be feeling, but I'm personally very lucky and grateful that I got to experience a life pre-smartphone. The majority of my childhood, I'd say right around the age of 18 was probably when I got my first smartphone, so it feels like this sort of funny climax thing. But I mean, like growing up, I remember the internet was so confined to a room in my house. It was like there was one big old gateway computer, and when I sat down there and plugged in the modem and waited 10 minutes, I could go on the internet. And that was actually like some of our very first inspiration for the light phone was remembering that like you used to go to the internet and leave it, and I just felt like once the smartphone came into my pocket and next to my bed and with me basically everywhere, I lost that sort of compartmentalization of it. Like, now I can check the internet on the toilet right before I go to bed, right immediately when I wake up, and I think that's probably what I feel like is the biggest difference is growing up directly with this technology completely inundating you. I remember seeing one of my teacher's kids go up to a TV and like touch it because they were used to touch screens, but I was like new to touch screens. I was like, you can't just touch every screen, but now you actually can touch every screen. So it's just like, like fundamentally like unbreaking these things is really hard, and I can only imagine what going through something like middle school and high school would be like from an academic perspective to like a social perspective of like, there was still bullying and self-image issues well before social media, but I can only imagine how that's only exaggerated that.
Especially with like AI, social media filters, like kind of these like pseudo personas that people create, right? Do you have anything to add there?
I mean, to that point, it's even different now for current middle schoolers, high schoolers, college students. Because chatbots weren't quite a thing yet when we were in school, but I'm hearing every day cases where, young people are kind of becoming reliant on it to complete assignments or to at least like bounce ideas about their homework, their classmates, their romantic interests, I have a question for you, Joe, as well. How long did you own a smartphone for?
I guess 18 years old till I started the light phone when I was 24.
Okay.
And then it was probably a few years before the light phone was a viable product to ditch my smartphone for good. So I probably had it for at least 10 years. That stretch.
Interesting.
And I, like most smartphone users, didn't particularly consider myself addicted, but it was very obvious that as a freelance creative person, who didn't have a clear on-off with work. My phone represented my job, and that's where I think a lot of my personal tension was, like seeing an email when I went to change the song when I'm at the beach, and you're like, I'm here to not work today, and I'm seeing this email from a client because I brought the entire internet in my pocket.
Yeah.
So that was like, obviously everyone is vulnerable to these things.
I'm starting to see a lot of people around that age of 24, 25, 26 recognize their own personal tension and realize that they don't have to accept that, right? Everyone's kind of coming to this push for a better alternative in their own way now, because I think at first the narrative was a little too general and too like blunt also, where it's sort of just like, we're all addicted, we're all having a mental health crisis, right? And this has a lot of truth to it, but I think that that draws more attention to edge cases where it's like people who were cyberbullied or had like something really extreme happen to them. But the fact of the matter is that like things are off for everybody, and it's interesting to see, especially as you like go through school, graduate college, like a discovery of more language for that, what that experience is.
I have a follow-up question there, really for all of us, but Nick, you are a part of that generation that has grown up a little bit more connected, right, with more technology, and you're talking about kind of now, I think, a response to that. From your perspective, what would you say is misunderstood about how Gen Z uses or feels about tech?
I think maybe one prevalent misunderstanding is the idea of the digital native. It's definitely an oversimplification, at least, where yes, it's true that I have more fluency or quicker to use certain tools because I had a computer from like age 2 or whatever. I like partly taught myself how to read with, like some phonics game. I played video games until I was like 14. I got an iPod Touch when I was in elementary school, iPhone when I was 10 or 11, Instagram around the same time. So it's true that like I can relate to those things in a different way than someone who came to it later, but it doesn't mean that I like grew up understanding what the mediums were doing to me, and how they were changing me slowly over time from the inside, right? I think in some ways digital native is a misnomer because it focuses only on that like sort of quick learning aspect of things in terms of like, oh, I can pick up a new phone and figure it out on the spot. There's some intuition, but also the things we grew up with were designed to be used in a simple way. They were designed to be intuitive, right? I think that there is a lot to be said for that point I just made before, right? Where increasingly we're starting to recognize like, oh, maybe I don't consider myself like super depressed, or I don't think that there was like one really extreme event that defines my relationship to technology. But over time, I'm starting to see how alienated I am from my own like sense of self and my own community. And those are the kinds of feelings that are really driving this like new wave of movement and activism.
Okay. I would generally agree there. I think I'm thinking specifically within the context of like DC, we have a huge tendency to oversimplify. For the sake of like policy discussion, right? And I think that has been in part detrimental to like some of the policy conversations that we're having in DC, specifically around like policies that seek to better regulate like use of technology for minors. And I know you all follow some of those policies as well with Design It For Us. Do you think there's any friction, to both of you, do you think there's any friction with like the, I guess, different generations and what they want out of these technologies that we have today? I'm sure you have thoughts around the light phone.
Yeah, I mean, I almost feel like there's probably more of a common thread than like comparing the two generations. Something I see is a very personal friction where a lot of, whether it's friends of mine or Gen Z that are reaching out, they're hyper aware of what these tools are doing now. They understand the mechanisms that are being used against them. They understand how these companies are not aligned with their personal values in any way, but I think they feel stuck to them still to some degree. And I think that's something we're always kind of diving into with Lightphone, is just like, how can we help them get unstuck or cross to maybe a product like the Lightphone or some more drastic change of their existing phone relationship.
Yeah, this aspect, sorry guys, this aspect totally goes beyond the generational compartments, as much of this does, but I think what we're seeing across the board, no matter how old you are, is a scarcity of imagination and this fear that's brought on by how individual our relationships to our technology and our tools have been made to be. And none of that's our fault, right? It is like the way that companies have been messaging for a long time, to Joe's point. It's the design of their tools themselves as well, because they don't really call for much collaboration between people. It's sort of just you and your screen, you and your updates, you and your feed, right? And because of that, I think we are less able to imagine alternatives for ourselves and to like really believe that they're possible and really feel the agency to move towards them. When you get used to a tool, your attention, your like mental habits really narrow. They're framed very much by that tool. If you only had a hammer to do everything around the house, you would see your house a certain way, right? You would be like, okay, like my fridge isn't working. Let me hit it a certain way with the hammer. Maybe that'll fix it. But it's not necessarily the right tool. That's just what you have, and your mind kind of like shapes around that option. I think the light phone is a great example of trying to expand that ecology of imagination for people and propose like, hey, here's another option that you have. Let's normalize that, and with that, you can get a cluster of friends, you can get a community to move towards it, and then model a different way of being to others, right? And that's very exciting, and I think that will be sort of a major impulse in the movement towards more responsible technology, and that's very exciting to see.
Yeah, it really is. I have a more personal question for the both of you. You and I have talked about this before, but is there a personal moment or experience where you rethought like your own digital habits that was kind of a turning point?
I would say there's a couple that stand out. They didn't feel particularly weighty at the time. They're just like the few instances of like on the beach changing the song with an email. That was like a very real moment, maybe 6 months before the Lightphone started. I think I'm a little skewed in that I joined this Google experimental program where we were looking at tech companies and how a designer might create different kinds of tech companies. That was the premise of this program I joined. So I think if it wasn't for that catalyst, I might not have been so razor focused on my phone relationships. But there was moments on the opposite side where like that summer before the Lightphone, I went on a maybe like 4-week road trip and was almost phoneless for the majority of that. And, at the time I thought like it was because I had books and the camera and all these things is why it was so amazing in nature. But I kept coming back to like when I also wasn't checking Instagram, I wasn't just habitually doom scrolling myself because I was bored for 5 minutes, and I came to acknowledge that was probably a huge reason why that road trip was so profound, and why when I go skateboarding, leave my phone at home, I have the best, most refreshing day. I'm like, yeah, I'm sure skateboarding and friends has something to do with it, but I think the phone is another aspect as well.
Yeah.
So I sort of saw both sides, the ways it was hurting me and the ways that I felt great without it. But the idea of ditching it forever seemed too far, so I was sort of like, how can we carve new relationships and new ways forward that aren't just like, well, let's dismiss it all, or let's fully go, forward.
Well, all that I was recently on vacation, and my favorite times on that vacation were when we lost service. Just no connection. Still the utility of like, I want to capture this moment, I want to take a photo, right? But just like not the dread of like, I'm gonna look at my phone, there's gonna be an email, and I'm gonna think about work, There's gonna be a social media notification or something.
Irony is that like now I probably have in magnitude more email and other things since starting the light phone than I did beforehand. But we also practice what we preach here, and so like I think we built a pretty cool casual culture at Light Phone where like we really put our money where our mouth is. We're not going to ask you to email after 5 p.m. or this or that. And so, even though the day might be very internet heavy, work heavy, stress heavy, we're daily reminded why we're doing this, because we use this tool ourselves and it's helping us find that balance.
Well, and I was going to say, we appreciate your sacrifice in being the recipient of all of those emails. But it's really refreshing to hear that you still practice that sense of like discipline with your team, because that's not easy, and the choice is there, right?
It's
to be like,
sort of the
let's answer those
startup
emails
attitude, which is like, let's hustle, launch, speed this, and it's like I've sort of always known we were on a marathon and not a pump and dump sprint to make some money. We're here to build a lifestyle brand. It's going to take a while. We don't do paid advertising, and sort of your point, like our users are leading by example, and like a lot of our new users, like my friend had your phone for 6 months. I didn't get it at first. Then I realized how it wasn't really affecting his life. Then I realized how he's actually happier, more productive, and all these things. And I said, well, hey, how do you get around this? How do you get around that? And they this is how I figure it out. And so they, by example, are converting people, and that's a slow, long game. So, it's like, yes, it would be great if we finished that tool and delivered that software update yesterday. We're a week behind, but that's our reality.
It's a lived principle.
For the record, I'm a light phone user. And it taught me that, and it's still teaching me in a lot of ways, that discipline is gained through design, right? It's not something that you just like will out of yourself and say, no more emails after 5. The fact that you have a physical separation from the internet for a portion of the day is what allows you to start to draw those lines and observe them and respect them. You can't really expect anyone who could still reach for the internet 24/7 to like be as regimented in that way. And I think that when it comes to the hesitations or like the workarounds, right? I think that's similar to the point I was making about imagination, where it's like you just won't really know until you sit through the uncertainty yourself. I came here without a phone at all today. I just had like a QR code for NewLab printed out on the other side of like an event ad for something I did last week. And it didn't work on any of the scanners to get in here. So I just had to go up to security and say like, hey, can you look up my information? Sorry. And like that was the workaround in this case, right? Sometimes it's less easy than that, but you just don't really know until you're in the situation. But what I found is most most of the time there's going to be a human there to work with you. It's not just like, oh my god, I'm locked out of the system entirely. I'm doomed.
Yeah.
I like when you first saw me running at this point, like sometimes I'll ask people like whether or not you buy a light phone, just try leaving your phone for 20 minutes at home and go on a walk. And I think it's surprising how different you feel without that thing in your pocket. Like I'm constantly hearing people surprised, like, you know, I knew it'd be different, but I didn't think I'd feel like I was actually on a drug or something. Like your perspective is that altered. That you like feel that different. Like you're like, am I naked? Like, does anyone else know I don't have a phone?
Yeah,
like, it's
and
like
you
this
keep
kind
trying
of
to
that's so
true.
true.
Like no one has any idea. I don't have
Does
a
anyone
smartphone.
else know? Yeah, very relatable.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
And I think that's a funny phenomenon. It speaks to how we're like probably all a little bit more attached than we'd all like to admit, even to ourselves. So that's like one little experiment. I want to say, just try it. You know, like a pet rock. You don't even need a phone. Don't go too far. You know, be safe. But like,
that's really interesting. I want to start diving into some questions around personal well-being, around tech use. I think my first question is on a cultural level, would you identify this like consciousness or intention behind looking to products like the light phone as a part of counterculture, or would you identify them as a part of like an emerging culture that you understand as kind of a very natural response to like the overwhelming tech use that we see today?
I'd say it has felt like counterculture, but I see the potential for it to be not just this very minute thing, but actually emerge as a bigger movement, whether or not that means that the iPhone is dethroned and there's these other products that are now in its place. I'm not sure it might reach that level in the near time future, but I just think again and again we're seeing how universal this problem is. You know, whether it's Bible Belt families we talk to here, to CEOs, to college kids, to celebrities, everyone has their own entanglements with these products that are not making them feel good. And so I think it's not just this very, very niche thing, but inherently going against the grain right now where everything is moving towards assuming you have a smartphone, there is this tension that feels kind of counterculture. You know, having to print out a QR code and having to ask someone for things, and it's, you know, it's just everything is assuming that you're having a smartphone. They're trying to move to no metro cards and no parking meters and just all app. And so in that regard, I almost feel like proud to be like, no, I don't want a future where everything's on an app. Even if I was a smartphone user, that's not the world I want to move to. So I do feel like people that use something like the light phone, and I'm sure someone that uses a flip phone feels similarly, they feel almost like they have this talisman that they're proud of. Like when someone says, what the heck is that thing? Is that a phone? And usually people are like able to then relate that to their personal values and say like, yeah, I have this phone because I don't like Facebook. I don't like what AI is doing to the environment. I don't like whatever the reason your motivation is, it's represented in this product. And I think that's just a really powerful thing, but I think that can scale. I don't know if it's going to be, you know, light phone. We've never pitched it to VCs as this hockey stick growth. We've always been like, yeah, we're growing year over year in a very grassroots way, and like that's how we'd love to keep it growing.
Yeah, well, I think there's something really authentic that resonates. It's like you said, it's that like it's like a lifestyle decision.
Totally. We consider it very much in line with like a diet or maybe going sober or a gym membership. Like these kinds of lifestyle changes where there's a lot of friction. It's not going to be easy. There's going to be moments where you maybe hate this, but the positive results will likely almost always outweigh any of those friction points. But you know, buying a blender doesn't mean you're going to eat smoothies every day. You have to then buy vegetables, and you know, it's an ongoing process. It's not just like you buy a light phone and magic pill.
Your life changes.
You're never going to think about the internet again. It's, you know, carving out a balance that works for you, your career, your family, and all of your needs, and it's not a one size fits all solution.
It also makes me think of like other industries that have kind of understood that sometimes it's also like a muscle memory experience where we just need something or a specific experience that helps us make that conscious decision to move away from something, right? And this is the thing that comes to mind, which is not a great example. But like cigarettes to like e-cigarettes, right? Where like kind of I think the thought at the beginning is like you're just holding something. Actually, you know what? The example that would come to mind is they do make like certain things that don't do anything. They're just sticks.
Yeah.
It's
right.
like the placebo or the
Yeah.
oral fixation that you
And like you I guess breathe it, but it actually doesn't do anything. It just has like a thing that slows down the air that's moving. So that I think is kind of, I guess if you're the person who's like constantly reaching for your phone in your pocket, and you have that sense of security or something to feel right that it's a wonderful outlet to like start to more easily make those conscious decisions to move away from like overconnectedness or overstimulation. I feel the overstimulation a lot, and I mean I have both of my phones pointing at me right now.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
Coming from overstimulation, I always call it using light phone the first time like a blank piece of paper. It can be an incredibly jarring experience. Like the overstimulation, we can recognize how it's harming us, but we're also used to it. So going to a slow thing is hard. So one thing I'm always sort of hinting at or asking people to do ahead of time is to really like think of a list, like a bucket list almost of like, I want to read this book, I want to watch this movie, I want to practice piano, like have things so that when you're like, what now? You start doing those things, and naturally what happens is almost anything that you do outside of the internet is going to like cherish your soul more than anything on the phone. So at a certain point you stop having to like try so hard to get away from the phone because you're like, I don't even want that anymore. Like I want to do the things that make me feel good. Obviously that's the place to aspire to get to, but I've seen it happen time and time again where you fill that 1 hour with a book instead of Instagram, and then a week later you've read 2 books, and now you have all these things, and it's just
it's so much more gratifying too than like an endless scroll.
I mean, a book versus a feed, it's like you're getting one person's really thoughtful words in one stream. So you're still reacting to something, it's not a blank piece of paper, but Instagram is just fractions of seconds of things that go across all positive, negative, up, down emotions, and it's just like you leave just like, what did I even experience?
Yeah.
Even if I learned a fact or read a poem, it didn't like sit with me. I just liked the poem and then kept it moving. It's like that's not a way to experience art. So
to metabolize it.
Yeah.
It's all this is just one important step on the journey of self-discovery or something of becoming more and more human, right? We, I think, need more friction because friction's a generative thing, right? It isn't maybe what it sounds like to a lot of people. It isn't just like sort of inconvenient and disruptive and preventative, but rather it slows you down to be more conscious. It creates space for you to have more perspective, to see more choices, and then to like choose more things than you have tended to when you're in a smooth, sticky habit phase, right? So I think because of the like fact that we are kind of pulling back from the status quo in a lot of ways, it might read as countercultural for a bit, and we're very early still in what is becoming a broader movement across not just New York or America, but it is very much an international, global affair. And I would say that it's inevitable that we're at least going to move towards some future where there's an expanded idea of like what tools can be in our lives. I also don't know if it's going to be like overthrowing Apple and having tons of competition, or if it's just going to be like a similar setup, but there's new values represented. who knows? That's not our job here, but yeah, I do think that we should be mindful, right, as advocates, as designers, engineers, to send the broadest and most universal messages we can to, and that it isn't just seen as this rebellious episode.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, some of our best quote unquote marketing is actually just turning the microphone over to our users, and someone's like, well, how could I possibly do that as a mom? And we're like, here's a mom who's doing it, and she talks about where there is friction, how she's gotten around things, and she is leading by that example that it is possible. So, we're trying to make it so it's not just some weird creative kid that doesn't have a real job. That that's I could never do that as a real person in society, but actually you probably can, and there might even be some productivity benefits and all these other things that come with that.
Yeah, I'm thinking about our digital strategy director, Lucas, who ironically is a huge fan of the light phone. I say ironically,
every phone ever. So
his
collection.
Yeah. And so and I love that because I think it's also really cool to see that in the team, where the same individual that kind of drives our understanding and presence digitally and can kind of be our master of craft when it comes to production. Is also super conscious of his tech use, and as his coworker / boss, it's interesting to interact with that too, because I know when he's disconnected, and so we have figured out how to be super mindful of the fact that he is a conscious tech user, and on our team, when you run a full Gen Z team, that just comes with the territory. You folks want that respect, and I recently spent a whole week with Lucas in Michigan. We were out there for a conference, and I saw how he interacted with his tech, and I felt like I really needed to change my tech use after that because he balances it so well, and it's the phone, and the work phone comes out when he needs to do work things, right?
A lot of work is focus. And I think what we've seen with college students, maybe as an example, is that they're so invested in their future. They got into this program. They maybe took out an insane loan to be there. And then when they're trying to write the paper, they get a little nervous and they find themselves reaching for it like a crutch. Mm-hmm. And it's they just want to focus. So actually, by being offline, sometimes you're able to focus more on the actual problem at hand versus this illusion of multitasking. I answered 6 emails, but it's actually you just had to write this one thing. Mm-hmm. Those emails are lower priority, but the phone brings everything to the foreground. You're just almost the illusion of a way.
Yeah. It's the illusion of the importance. It's proximity, I guess, right? Yeah. We've talked a little bit about the individual decisions and culture that's arising. I guess to close that out, I think I would totally agree with both of you. I don't think that's a counterculture thing. I think that's just a natural evolution. I am very excited to see how that continues to evolve as we all experience increased fatigue as well from our tech use. But I know that even you all, I'm sure, have moments where the tech is pulling you back in. Right, either because of work or whatever it is. How, as individuals that are so hyper conscious of this, what are your strategies for recognizing that when it's happening, and then making a conscious decision to reboot or step away when you need to?
Yeah, I mean, I think not to use the light phone as an example, but by getting a tool like the light phone. Sort of your point earlier, you're cutting off even the option. Mm-hmm. So even if my urges are spiking, or I'm feeling vulnerable, I'm feeling nervous or something, when I'm out and about with my light phone, I've chosen to not give myself that option at home. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it can become a slippery slope, and I've heard of different strategies of turning off the Wi-Fi at a certain hour, putting away your laptop or whatever it is that you might be finding yourself vulnerable, but my personal strategy is always just to distract myself by something I want to do, and maybe I'm lucky as a sort of like artistic minded person. There's like a bucket list of paintings or books I want to read or things I want to do. So as quickly as possible, just like reverting that into something else works for me. But everyone's going to sort of build their own mechanism for dealing with that.
Yeah, I feel like step one for me, which was also the hardest thing to learn, is always have some grace for yourself and for other people as you observe their use too. None of us have like super faulty brains, that just like happened to always be craving technology and media at all times. It's really just like the system that emerged that we've all found ourselves part of in some way. So yeah, really like taking that to heart did a lot, because for most of my adolescence, I was like beating myself up. I was like, why can't I focus? Why am I like texting people on Instagram, Snapchat instead of studying or doing the thing that obviously matters more to me, right? I was so like confused by like the gap.
You weren't able to actually.
The gap between what you're doing, what you want. And also like the effects on the sense of self there are crazy, right? You have generations of people growing up who are like, wait, I thought I was supposed to be this way, I thought I wanted to be this person, but my revealed actions are like not in line with that at all, right? So I think we, as hard as it is, just need to like be like, okay, that's not any like individual's fault. I'm not just like a misshapen person. Beyond that though, I do think it's about separation and having a diverse toolkit, not having an all-in-one Swiss Army knife at all times, but recognizing like, okay, I'm gonna like save signal for my computer and like read PDFs on my iPad or print them and do calls and texts on a light phone, right? Separation goes a long way because you're not gonna have access to all of those things always. And I'm meeting a bunch of people lately in my work who don't have Wi-Fi in their apartments and they have to go to a cafe or a public library or something. I also have two friends who only use shared computers, right? They don't have their own laptop anymore. So there's a lot of experimentation that you can do on a personal level to kind of like see what's right for you, and then that might change over time because your job might change, your needs might change, your social life might change in a way that you have to like reconfigure that, and that's cool. I'd love to normalize that. I'd love to get to a point where like we don't feel like we all have to do the same thing with our tech, but then stick with that for eternity either.
I mean, even just the awareness that we have the choice to decide how. I think sometimes we just feel like, well, we got a smartphone, and the smartphone kind of does that. I don't need this tool or that tool. So like step one's always just being like, you could carve out a different life. And
there could be a benefit.
I'm sure your setup is different than mine. It's different than Kaiway and everyone else on our team. I love that you brought up the word friction before, because that's one that I think we're always thinking about, and I think tech has this frictionless world promise, and I always think back to this Kurt Vonnegut quote where his wife is telling him, "Why do you buy 100 envelopes? You're just going to the store to buy one envelope." But his whole point in this little ramble is that like on the way to the store, he sees a baby in a fire truck and has an idea and hears a song and smiles at someone and gets the envelope, and his whole thing is that like computers make us want to do everything so easy that you actually lose the entire experience of doing anything. And like if something got so frictionless, we went to the like furthest extreme, then like we're not even actually like out in the world experiencing. He's like, we're dancing animals. Like going to buy that envelope is my life. It's not like I'm wasting my life doing it. It's like it's like a more of a philosophical perspective change, but you're like actually sitting at home and everything coming from the screen and just magically appearing, like, isn't that satisfying? At least for someone like me, like I went on this vacation and I searched in the thrift store for 6 hours and I found this little knickknack and it's special to me versus like the algorithm told me to buy this thing when I was in a scroll hole and I was feeling bad and it showed up at my door and what do you know, I'm not that much happier than I was before it. Like,
so, I spend a lot of my time, as you both know, in actions that are directly holding companies accountable. And that's why my voice is a little scratchy. I was at events last night. But, there also has to be grace for designers, engineers, operators of companies out there because a lot of their thinking, has been siloed off from this philosophical perspective. It's been like, well, here's one problem that we can address. Here's one thing that we can make easier for people. So like self-checkout or like being able to like order things seamlessly on your phone. Those are usually treated just like with this like narrow vision of, okay, how do I make this one thing easier to do? I think that sometimes they lose sight of how that's going to add up, right? How like if 10 other companies are making everything else in a person's day easy to do, then we will completely lose those small moments of friction, those opportunities to have spontaneous face-to-face interactions, to be inspired by something outside on the street. And I think that's why we see a lot of like tension here where, businesses are kind of like, well, what do you want us to do? It wasn't our fault. We weren't trying to mind control everyone. But something has emerged where there's too much, we're oversaturated with smoothness, and we do need to ideally like adopt this perspective of we're all in it together and we all need more friction. So let's figure that out. Let's design for that. Yeah.
And like, I know it's not as individual, but friction also is kind of an illusion in that like that frictionless experience that you have with your screen, there's a lot of real environmental and real world people getting paid to make that experience happen or not getting paid or not having the rights. And, like if everyone's just getting Uber Eats, now the fabric of the city is 1 million Uber Eats delivery people running around. And that is like a tangible change that happens. And like the seamlessness of being able to ask the GPT this seems like magic, but actually there's like a town over there that's running out of water because water. So like,
and then more data centers need to be built.
It's not actually as frictionless as we like, as tech wants us to believe.
You just get transferred.
We're just trading it, and it's like obviously usually going down the class hierarchy. Like most of these things.
Optimistically, AI is making us more sensitive to that. I think it's a moment we need to capitalize on. To use words I'm conditioned by. We need to like advocate for policy intervention there. We need to unite communities around America who are seeing this in real time. Are like, oh, like my neighborhood is being affected by the noise, the ecological damage, all of these things. The bills are going up. My like quality of life is going down though. Like, really just use that as a moment to unite and build solidarity because it's more embodied than it used to be. That Uber example is great, but like we're so used to cars on the road, we're kind of like, I don't know, I guess the idea of pollution is kind of like hard to grapple with, but when you're uprooting huge swaths of land with the express purpose to like run ChatGPT, then
when we were like already in an energy deficit that we've been trying to get ahead of with climate policy for how many years, and then to like take a drastic step sort of in the wrong direction, or at least not giving ourselves a great chance of getting ahead of it. It's a little sad to see on a larger, less individual level.
The energy consumption increases are enormous too, and that's something that like a lot of the folks in energy that we talk to have a real concern about. That like we're not meeting those demands in the next 5 years. And what does that mean?
Happen immediately. It's not like in 15 years energy is going to be crazy. It's like they're spinning these up right now.
Yeah, I mean the concerns are like in the next 5 years, like will we see rolling blackouts? Like how will we prioritize, right? Like in specifically in these spaces where we're building these data centers, driving the majority of our energy consumption increase.
Yep.
It's real, right? Or like what are we gonna do when we have to tell consumers that their bills are doubling, right, in the next 5 to 10 years, more like 5. It's hard conversations.
Unprecedentedly warm because of global warming, and now you don't have AC because of something. You can imagine some really scary situations.
Part of the reason it's hard to talk about is that, right? Confronting that reality. Part of it's also that like few if any had the foresight, right? When they're like, I'm just gonna start an AI company, build a product. Oh, you're telling me that it's doing this? What? We're drawing from from nature in this extreme way.
It always has been drawing. I think that's
it always has been.
It's like the magnitude just took a humongous
I've been speaking to some founders. Like last night, I spoke to the founder of the Friend AI necklace, Avi Schiffman, and he said that he wasn't even fully aware of how much an AI query was damaging the environment, specifically like what the water usage looked like until that recent push across New York against his MTA subway campaign. For anyone who doesn't know,
one to see just as a bystander.
The biggest
I guess inspiring.
The biggest ad campaign in New York history. For the Friend AI necklace,
Is that what that is?
Yeah, it was over $1 million spent on it, and
I saw that in the subway.
there was huge pushback across the city where people were like graffitiing the ads, writing.
It was coincidentally like a white ad, so left itself up.
A lot of white
space,
and people were like ripping them down and all that. And he seemed to have invited that conversation. But it got ideas out there into the world, which were like, hey, this has a high risk of surveillance issues. This is damaging the environment. This is, whether you like it or not, contributing to the loneliness crisis. All these things, which are true, and
there's so many things. Reasoning is going,
and you kind of hear a response from someone like him who's like, I didn't quite realize the extent of it because he's a 22-year-old, and just kind of was following the stream, right? He was like, this is where the money is, this is where the cultural capital is, all the
it's the next iteration for these
but there are consequences, and we need people like him to join forces with people like us and say, you know what, we have to turn this around a bit. We need harder lines, we need to get policy passed, right? We need to be doing more right now.
We've very organically started to move into the next section, which is human-centered innovation. And that intersection of what we're seeing designers build and what we can do as people driving policy to help build more human-centered innovation. So I think we're talking about that really well. The big question: how else can public policy nudge or even require that kind of design ethos in some of these larger companies? And we have good, responsible design principles from folks like you all, but how else are we encouraging that?
I think before we get into the specifics of how that whole procedure works, we do have to just keep in mind the lead by example point, right? We need good design philosophy that's translatable to the masses. We need to point out why something like a necklace that calls itself a friend is not human-centric at all, right? We need to get this sensitivity up of how can we use tools to enable us to express our agency, to be creative in the way we want to be, and not let tools use us. The more we build that out, the better we can meet with lawmakers and have different conversations.
I want to flag something both of you said earlier, which was being conscious of the fact that frictionless does not necessarily mean better, right, or more human-centered. Just because you're streamlining all of these processes does not mean you're building a tool that actually adds value to somebody's life. And I think that's really really important to bring up again in this conversation around human-centered innovation, because to your point earlier, I mean, friction can be a good thing sometimes, right? Like intentional
helping on friction.
Yeah,
We're always
helping
like
friction.
saying, using it internally at Life Phone, we're thinking about features to prioritize. It's like there's unnecessary friction, which is a feature that we didn't flush out right. That's like causing the user like an annoying pain point on the Life Phone, versus like necessary friction that's a part of the lifestyle change. And so like, there are things that we're trying to do so that we're like, we agree that the phone should make calls and texts, let's make them do it as well as it possibly can. And that's the kind of friction that we're trying to eliminate, is like it should call frictionlessly. You should just not have to think about it. And I think there is an invisibleness to human-centered design if done well, where it just feels natural. Like if you have a human-centered design brush, you just grab it and your hand fits in it nice, because
you don't have
it's
to think
maybe
about how
not
to
like
hold
the
it.
design philosophy, and it's not going to be in the moment or something, but you're like, when you grab it, when my mom grabs it, it's designed for the human hand. Like, you sort of don't need to know. There's other instances where I think human-centered design does need a very specific person in mind. I think at Life Phone, that's sort of how we see human-centered design, is if we think of a human and their use case, and it's a lot about saying no to features. Like human-centered design is like making a Life Phone, which is a phone that's supposed to encourage someone to change their relationship. If we start adding every single feature that someone might request, we start to get away from that. So I think like for us, human-centered design often in the Life Phone instance is saying no to features that might make sense for that one person, but that person isn't who we're designing for right now. Or a smartphone tries to be the everything phone for everyone, and I think that's almost like undesigned in a way.
That's really interesting.
So like, when I think about shoes, there's like so many different types of shoes. We probably each have 3 different types of shoes on for different activities, for different aesthetics, for medical and other handicap reasons. And yet when we have phones, it's like one phone for everyone. And so I think I'd love to see more types of phones. Like we might not be making the phone for this person, but someone else might make a better phone for them. And I'd like to see more expression in that way. When it comes to policy, like Light hasn't had a terribly deep impact. I think I've done interviews here and there with some people that work in it, but I've always been a little skeptical, as if policy is going to lead the way. That it sort of feels behind, and especially when it comes to tech things. I think politicians, being that they're primarily significantly older and not working in tech, even if they bring people in to help assist them, it just feels like they're sort of like 4 steps behind whatever big tech might be doing and maneuvering, and they sort of like ask forgiveness rather than permission.
Policy is a tool in itself that like designs the world we live in, and like kind of it shapes our options in terms of like what are we going to make, who are we going to make it for, right? And it's in their best interest to keep that as open-ended as possible, so they can keep getting away with like this, whatever you just said was a great way of putting it, right? Like it's undesigned, right? It's for everyone at all times. But there are concrete efforts going on in the policy world to change that. It's just that we need more help on that end of things, right? Because our lobbying efforts versus the hundreds of millions of Meta and Google and Apple and them.
I definitely didn't
crazy.
belittle. Love to see policy.
We need the cultural work. We need the radical technologists and the activists to build more and more coalition, so that it's a different story.
And I see things like the Light Phone being perfect conversation starters for our work around like giving folks the options and alternatives to say, look, we can make progress here. Like there is growth here, right? Partnership.
You need more people to feel it too, so they can believe in that future. You have to experience life outside of the frame, so you can introduce people to a new
The word lifeboat came to mind earlier as we were talking about the Light Phone, and I think from like the vantage point of our work and being in DC specifically, you're right. It's giving folks that like physical representation of like this is what we mean, or like this is, you know, like what we're talking about when we say like better managed tech use.
Because there are some really easy things that could be done. We saw one success recently with the phone-free school policies, right? New York.
And that's where I'd love to see the policy. It seems the most agreed universally, or like has the most chance to impact.
And New York's one of the states that implemented it this year, and from everything I can hear and all the places I've been in, it's going well overall. You know, there's age-appropriate design codes. There are ways that we can make recommendation feeds less addicting, or that have more support for user choice, right? That they can choose what's given to them and how, rather than, you know, receive this like very commercially motivated set of videos. There's also, you know, just the kind of idea of like interoperability or something like that does not let any individual platform get by with like shutting out all creativity on the user's part, or the ability for them to own and transfer their own data across platforms. There are App Store level interventions that are getting pushed right now. There was a recent FTC case against Apple on those grounds, where they were like, hey, maybe some of Apple's App Store practices are actually non-competitive, and how can we, just build more energy around those kinds of things right now, because they do matter, and they at least send positive signals out there into the world to say like, hey, we don't have to accept this status quo for what it is forever. But it's definitely like the most uphill battle of our time right now.
We are very fortunately in the same room right now physically, which is really cool, and something that the three of us share in our work is that we're also going through this journey of building movement and building our work as founders, as like startup, you know, leaders. And I think, you know, I want to kind of dive into that a little bit, just because that's also unique in this setting, right? Adding to kind of this conversation about like building new awareness or building new products. So I want to dive into that a little bit. Your work, Joe, with Light Phone started as an experiment. When did it turn into something that you knew would be a company? Was there a specific point for you?
Yeah, I think it was probably when, from this sort of theoretical program where everyone in the program had, you know, 12 different companies that we were pitching, but, you know, I had just a piece of plastic that represented the Light Phone, and fortunately I had these very polarizing conversations, which as an artist was like the most exciting part. Like, I didn't make an actual phone, I just said, hey, this is going to be a phone that only makes phone calls, it's your phone away from phone. And some people immediately loved it or immediately hated it. And in that gap, we had the most interesting conversations, existential, about what it means to be a CTO and a father, and how do you balance responsibility versus responsibility to your kid and your career. And you know, that was like the crux of what I'd always hoped my art would get to. And now with this product and this price tag, it was having that conversation. And at the end of the program in May 2015, we launched a Kickstarter. And I think that was us sort of publicly posing the question to the world of like, what do you think? Do you want to try something different? Are you happy? And that response we got, we raised $400,000, which in cell phone terms is essentially no money at all, but was a humongous validation for Kai and I. You know, I think we were ecstatic. We couldn't believe like 70 different countries people would come from. And I think at that point we had sort of committed to trying to make this thing a real thing. And in doing so, I think my ambitions for it grew substantially. Instead of sort of coming from this artist mindset, I'm going to make a phone, it'll be this thing, it'll be a project, like an addition, you know, it'll keep going. I said, no, actually, like, there's a huge opportunity here for a different kind of technology company, not just like the light phone, but like a company whose business model is more straightforward. We sell a product, there's a price tag, it's not free like Instagram or Google Maps or any of these other TikTok services we use, and we hope that we make the phone that provides you with enough value that the price tag is worth it for you, and we can make our modest business off of that. And that idea just felt like so strong to me at the time, like duh, everyone wants to be treated in an honest relationship with the products, and it wasn't obvious then at the scale it is now how these smartphone apps were working using the attention economy and mass collection of data to flip it right back into super hyper targeted ads. And so I think that was like the culmination moment. Was like we did this Kickstarter, we had no PR strategy, and we got super lucky that it went on its own, I guess, viral to some degree. People were sharing it on Facebook and little local news, and all of this. TechCrunch picked it up. I think that was a big turning point. But at that point, we're like, now we've taken people's money. Now we're actively trying to raise money, find partners, and build this company. So that was definitely the turning point moment.
Maybe I'll ask you the same question.
Yeah, so I've spent time in the startup world myself. I worked at a couple businesses that were interested in offering alternatives to social media, and what I learned there was that even the way we think about designing an alternative is often conditioned by incumbent technology. It's conditioned by like the values that big tech is kind of programmed into us, and the way that they've dominated the marketplace for so long. So instead of like a truly radical design idea like Joe's, you tend to get like something that's still basically a short form video feed. It's like mostly just TikTok, but with like a better feature, or like one safety mechanism in place. And this is no like shade to any particular effort, but I think that we do need to create some way to inspire and motivate like more radical reimagination in founders. We need to incubate ideas that I guess are going about this alternative future in a way that's less influenced by a track that's been set out for us by other people, right? And this track tends to look like you come up with something that's like kind of similar but has its own quirk to it, and then what are your options? Like selling out to the big tech company, or like something along those lines. And then you also see something like we want to get more people connected in the real world with a platform, right? And the irony of that is you aren't really facilitating a new kind of human connection. You're still doing like an algorithmic curation or giving people space to instant message each other, which is fine, but it's also not fine when it's encroaching on the potential for like the embodied and like serendipitous ways that we can find each other as well. So I just think that we need to like kind of bring more founders together in a way that's inflected towards like something beyond what we've already seen and beyond what we already know and what we're conditioned to think about, because we can see, and the light phone is proof of this, like more surprising answers to these questions.
Have you heard of like, I always feel like I shout out these guys as a software similar kind of business model flip, the Arena team?
Yeah, absolutely.
Those
Arena's
guys
a great
are
example.
awesome. They're a really nimble software team. They make this product. I use it to sort of like make my own sort of mood boards, maybe not the right word, but collections of digital things I find and inspirations. pay a small monthly fee, and their whole business is building better features for me to better collect these things, and they have like a transparency around their, income and how much it costs their operations, how many paying users they have, and it's very obvious that like we are supporting with my $5 or $10 a month this platform that gives me a value. And one can start to imagine like what if social media was built with that kind of foundation. I don't think they call themselves a social media platform, but there is some sharing and this and that, but it's like a drastically different relationship. I don't find myself like opening it and then 3 hours later I'm still on it. It's like very much built as a tool, and then there's a price tag. And I think that's something like I'm sort of always like mulling over is like, is that actually what the crux is? Is that we are paying for these things with actual money?
I think in a way it is, because like on the end of the user, you don't like go offline just to cut yourself off and be off the grid and like you said, be like artsy or something. I think the real argument for spending some time, with a dumb phone or deleting your social media accounts is so you can like have a higher attentional capacity to figure out like what tools do I actually need in my life, right? Instead of the one that's been given to me from above, like is there like a specific thing that would make my life a lot easier? And in the case of, I guess, an artist or someone who has like a need to curate text or images or links in their lives, which is what Arena does, and they would come to that conclusion by like having a breath of fresh air and saying like, okay, now I can see what matters in my life a little more clearly without all the like nonsense jammed into my eyeballs from the feed. And I can seek out that tool, or I can build that tool for myself and others who have that need as well. I think
there's like an expectation or a lack of expectation. Like, I don't think Charles is like, we're going to get 1 billion users this year. But he built a business around, if we can get this many hundreds or thousands of users, we can build our little thing and sustain this thing, which is obviously not an appealing or sexy business to a venture capitalist or anything like that. But I think more small niche things is what I'd love to see. Like my mom will never use Arena, but I'm sure there could be a tool that would connect her with her church friends, and she could share her songs and her videos and like not be succumbed to Facebook in the same way that I am and my little brother are. And this is communities. Also, like you were talking about like apps that try to build a in real life community. I think underestimate what a community really is and how hard it is, and how serendipity is probably the closest way you get to it. Proximity and serendipity, but you can't just like fabricate a way to like these things just spin up out of nothing. Like a community, a real one that has any lasting value, isn't an easy thing. And there's going to be disagreements. It's like a family or a company. Like it's a living, breathing thing that you need to put work into it. It's not just like, oh, I made an app, and now we have all these communities everywhere. No, you need to keep investing.
That word gets thrown out a lot
digitally. After week. And I think that's why it's so inspiring what you guys are doing. It's like each week I see a new flyer at Tompkins, and I'm like, the moment that is happening, and it's like, that's a lot of work, Like Light Phone, we're not doing that to that capacity, but I try my best to show up on Reddit and Discord where like we have little communities of like phone users and try to be there for them so they feel part of the picture too. But it's a different thing. I'm not pretending we're building a community.
I appreciate that. That's a good kind of like linguistic clarification that we need, right? It's like, what are we actually saying when we seek connection or community or all these other ideas? I co-hosted a Delete Day last week in Tompkins. That's what Joe was alluding to, which was, somewhere between 80 and 100 people gathered in the park. We mostly just spread the word with physical flyers, and I have this new event bulletin online that's run on a platform called Button Down. It's a one-man team, very similar to what Charles does at Arena insofar as like transparency over the income. This is where your $9 are going and why. This is how I handle all the data that comes in and out as well. And anyway, I digress. The thinking is like if we can do more events in public that are participatory, free, and that are promoted through word of mouth, through these physical posters, and by tabling. My friends and I have just been like tabling at parks and on the streets in the city to be like, hey, we use flip phones and dumb phones, come talk to us about it. We deleted social media, come talk to us about it. And you have these interesting conversations with people who are drawn to the idea, and you're embodied together, and you feel each other shake as you get over the instead you're like bonding over like the social anxiety that you're overcoming in real time. That goes a long way, and that's obviously something that can't be replaced by technology, but I think there's room for nuance here too, because like I think we might have all connected over email initially, right? And it's not that you can never establish like a point of contact online. I think it's like email and platforms can be really useful tools for that. I think that's why I was going on a tangent about the button down newsletter that I started, because I'm also reaching more people that I might not have without it. However, the relationship itself does not grow in those mediums, right? The relationship grows like this.
And iPhone wouldn't exist without Kickstarter as a platform. That's we tried the old school. We talked to investors, and we needed to prove, and that flipped how businesses are made. But that was like one part of the relationship. The other part was me showing up every week to be accountable to the people that gave us the money.
Yeah. So just to put a pin in that, like the design of a tool that gets people connected, or at least like brings them into contact with each other, to clarify what we mean there, right?
I mean, the word sounds cringy, but there is a true connection to it.
Yeah. We should make sure that tool is not the same thing that gives you all your entertainment and news and hooks you for all these reasons, right? It just has to do that one thing. It just has to tell you where the event is. It just has to allow you to exchange phone numbers or addresses or whatever, right? Set a meeting point. It should not be wrapped into all this other stuff.
Yeah. I think that's really interesting, especially like I want to take a second to recognize this is the first time we're doing an in-person recording for ZETA, and I think that to us is like it was really nice to have that be this conversation intentionally, right? And there's more of I think an appreciation on my end for being able to put this conversation together, especially coming up from DC to like come and be with you all. You all can't see them, but bring cronuts and like just be able to be in real community, right, in that experience, and recognize that it's ephemeral, and we're here to have a conversation. We'll stay connected, but again, it's not that like physicalness, and so it gives added value to it, which is really nice. We're starting to talk about this, and I want to start to wrap this up. Being mindful of time. I can't see the time. All right. Be mindful. What do you guys do?
Yes.
Okay. We're talking about events that are free, that are open, that folks can come and engage with, which I think is a good time to bring in. How do we intentionally continue to make this movement or these opportunities accessible to people, so that finances are not a hindrance from people to be intentionally disconnected or build community with these movements. You talk about free events and the importance of bringing people together in these open public spaces. Obviously, there's a cost associated with the light phone, less than what I pay for my phones, but
more than I'd like.
Yeah. So either of you want to talk about that piece? Accessibility.
Yeah, I mean that's definitely where me and my fellow organizers are coming from with this free public participatory approach, but
There's a lot of labor behind the free
yeah,
thing. It's not
yeah,
just like, hey, we're going to see you next
definitely.
Thursday. You're making flyers,
Yeah,
you're
we had to-
talking to people.
we had to buy like picnic blankets, which were weirdly expensive
Yeah.
for people to sit on when they were deleting their accounts. And I think it's about building the world that you want to live in together, right? We are not just saying, hey, look, your technology isn't, as good as it can be, it's harming you, you should get off it. It's not just like that, right? It's instead of being caught in the algorithm, being entrenched in the screen-based life, let's go out and exercise our agency together. Let's go outside and kind of regain some of the muscles that have atrophied when we're like sitting around screens for so long. Even if you are being like socially active online and you're having tons of productive meetings and group chats to make plans and stuff, like even if you aren't just the kind of person that watches videos all day and rather you are interacting with other people, you're still limiting your experience. And what we can offer each other is just something more and something better, and it doesn't have to cost money. It doesn't have to look any sort of way in particular. It's an open call to just like gather in a space, put your phones away for a while, and see where the mind goes, right? My work at the School of Attention is very much in that vein. We facilitate what we call practices of attention with the public. So people come in and the only barrier to entry is like, are you willing to spend some time with strangers? Because we lead these pretty open-ended experiences where it's like, all right, the way that you focus on your work in a Google Doc or the way that you focus on a message chain, it's just one type of attention. There are so many other ways we can practice or move our attention through our body, through other senses that we don't use as often, as a collective, right? Sustained or short and sporadic. There are like all these different qualities of it we can play with, and it doesn't cost money to do that, right? You just sit together and you're like, all right, let's do a 3-step exercise where we it could be as simple as like, I'm gonna look at my hand, then your hand, then both of our hands, right? But just like that moment of like, oh, we're doing something that is not what I would have been doing alone on my device. That like little realization when you're there, when you're actually experiencing it, boom, opens so much.
To your point earlier about growing up just before kind of this like tech flood, I remember being like 5 years old or like 6 and just like sitting with your hand, like my hand, right, and like studying all the little pieces. And I don't know if that's something that kids are doing today.
I'm not.
Well, even little kids, right? I think about my nieces and nephews, right, that like are growing up and they have that proximity to so many screens. Are they exploring themselves? Are they like looking at like the creases on their hand? Are they like feeling dirt and just like examining dirt? Like, are they exploring their actual lived environment?
I hope so, but they might not be.
Yeah. Well, that's actually sometimes when I want to disconnect, I just sit there and I'm like, cool. Has anything changed? All the creases still there. I think it's really interesting. I want to open up the floor in case either of you want to share anything else here in the conversation before my closeout
question. You made a really great point there in relation to like financial accessibility, that so often these like alternatives are free. And maybe that's why they're like, capitalism is less interested in showing them us, but it's like, yeah, we can go to the park and invent a game for free and have just as much fun as we spent $60 to go be entertained at some event or something. And accessibility is like a tricky one with light phone because we do have this hard cost, but that's like the financial aspect, and there's different ways where you might save money each month, or the phone hopefully lasts many years, and maybe that washes out. But I hate the idea that like being attentive and being away from the smartphone has to be considered a luxury. I think some people feel like they don't have that luxury. You know, if you work 3 jobs and you're a struggling single mother, like, yeah, it might seem impossible to get away from that smartphone between daycare and this and that errand. And that's really where I'm always trying to be like, how can we make it so that the light phone, like anyone could try it if they wanted. Obviously financially there's one aspect, but even just in terms of like friction, there's a good friction, there's a bad friction, and how are we making it so it's not just like some celebrity can go light because he's got a personal assistant to do everything else. How can it be accessible so that like a high schooler could use a light phone without a smartphone and still get by in school, maybe even excel at school. You know, husband isn't then just putting all the earnest on his wife who has a smartphone to figure everything out. Like there has to be balance and stuff. So that's like sort of accessibility. But I think the great thing is that so often I find myself saving money because these IRL things, getting books is really cheap. Actually, there's used books, there's free books everywhere.
I've been going to the library lately.
It's like
It's magical.
Free
books.
taxes for these things. You always have. So, you know, it's sort of this like funny wake up call where like actually going on a walk is my favorite hobby. And people are always like, you just walk? And I'm like, yeah. And it's completely free. I get a little bit of exercise, some mental clarity. Sometimes I have a camera, sometimes I have a friend, sometimes some music, sometimes I'm just purely taking it in and looking at my hands, you know. And I do think sort of wrapping that up, like boredom as an artist is like the most sacred thing, like giving yourself that space. Like I never saw it as boredom because I think it's a word you just tend to want to avoid, but I like to see it as space. Like if I can carve out a full evening in my art studio where I don't need the internet, I have no one to attend to, like there's a chance magic might happen or something. But if I'm like, I got this thing in 3 hours, or every 15 minutes I'm checking my phone, it's like I'm like kind of not giving space for something to come up. And it might not be the first day, it might not be 3 weeks in, but I think if you keep showing up and giving yourself that space, it's already inside of us, whatever it is, those ideas and stuff. So, and it's free.
For my birthday this year, my partner got me a Statue of Liberty Lego set, and that was probably the most fun I've had in like months, because you're like completely disconnected, focusing on this like very like gradually growing process.
There's some gratification, seeing it get bigger.
There were moments where I was like, that piece doesn't look right, and I wanted to like pull out my phone and be like, is this the right, but you go with it. And like I think I don't know, maybe we take those moments for granted, or
I mean they're difficult when we're so constantly used to being stimulated. The lack of that is jarring. So I just, it's like you're saying, be graceful to yourself. It's not easy, and if you relapse and find yourself checking your phone, it doesn't mean that the whole day was wasted. It's about getting better. Kai's always saying like, maybe it's like these 5 days a week you're digital detoxing, and then you have 2 days where you can eat whatever you want. You can consume as much internet. Like diets don't have to be, these things can take the right size for you. Yeah, give yourself a treat. Watch 3 hours of YouTube at night to unwind, but like maybe not YouTube before you can brush your teeth and this. And you gotta find the time and place.
Okay. I have a closeout question for us here, which is, we all have to finish this sentence. The future of technology will be better when. It's a big question.
It fits into place in our individual lives, where technology is seen as a tool. Once again, we've been using this word all day because it's a philosophy that we share, but I think a lot of the work that we're all doing and many others are doing will bring, the culture towards this idea that, technology is not like a second limb, right? It's not like an innate part of the human existence. It's just something that we use to move about our day, like something that makes certain things easier and brings us some utility that we wouldn't have otherwise been able to access.
My first thought was a little bit reductionary, reducing it a bit, but I sort of felt myself saying like the future of technology would be better when we stopped thinking about the future of technology and calling it that, and as if it's some better plateau we're going to get to, the greener grass, and that we always have to be moving. I think the future of technology will be best when we are like deciding the direction based off of actually problem solving versus like we have this invention, we have this idea, we have this scheme. Let's now make a product and a thing in a category, and I think that's probably more what you're saying. Is it's almost like invisible. Like, the future of technology should just be like
it's there,
invisible. It's being used to make oceans cleaner. It's being used to make people safer. It's being used to innovate in all these very real ways that are almost invisible in our day-to-day lives or something but not this like the future is going to be flying cars. The future is going to be everyone with this. The future, I'm just sort of like the future is kind of boring right now. I walk around and this future is just like a lot of people on their phone everywhere. It's like I don't know. I want the future to be fun again. Future technology would be good when it's fun again.
Oh, I like that. I like the framing of that. I would answer by saying the future of technology will be better when we center the human experience. Which I think is encapsulates both of you.
Well, say you finished it in the actual sentence.
This has been an awesome conversation with both of you. Thank you guys so much for making the time. And I like this much better. Having a conversation in person is so much better than like over a screen. So thank you guys so much for being a part of that very first one. And I think folks will get a lot out of this, so I'm excited to share it out with folks.
Cheers. Thank you.
Thank you guys.